Before the first dollar is earned, before the opportunity arrives, before you even take the first action, there is a thought, unseen, unmeasured, but more powerful than any physical effort you could ever make. Thought is the architect. And your reality? It's the building that thought designed. This is what Napoleon Hill understood better than anyone of his time, that every mansion of wealth, every empire of influence, every kingdom of purpose, was once just a whisper in someone's mind. And yet, the same law that builds financial kingdoms can also build prisons. Mental prisons, emotional wounds, lifetimes of lack, not because of what happened outside, but because of what took root inside. The truth is uncomfortable. You are not a victim of your conditions. You are a product of your repeated thoughts. The conversation happening in your mind, day after day, is not just harmless noise. It is the vibration that programs your future. If those thoughts are drenched in fear, doubt, scarcity, resentment, then what you attract by divine law will mirror those energies. Napoleon Hill called this the law of autosuggestion, the principle that your subconscious mind becomes what you feed it continuously. And your subconscious doesn't argue, it doesn't resist, it obeys. If you constantly say, "I'll never be rich," "This isn't for people like me," "I don't deserve more," then your subconscious, like loyal soil, will grow whatever seed you plant. This is where most people miss the point entirely. They chase goals, but neglect the garden. They work harder, but think smaller. They try to manifest blessings, with minds full of wounds. And so the question is not, how do I get rich? The real question is, what kind of inner world am I creating? And what kind of wealth or wound is it attracting? We live in a world obsessed with doing. Strategies, hustle, productivity, execution. And while all of that has its place, the greatest movements in your life won't start with a calendar. They'll start with a command whispered to your subconscious. This is who I am becoming. But here's the hidden danger most people never see. If you've been wounded, emotionally, spiritually, financially, your thoughts begin to wear the scars. They stop reaching. They stop risking. They settle into patterns of protection instead of creation. This is why many can't rise no matter how hard they try. They're not fighting life. They're fighting their own inner programming. You can't build generational wealth with thoughts soaked in shame. You can't attract divine opportunities while silently believing you're unworthy of them. You can't walk in your calling if your thoughts are still trapped in someone else's rejection. Napoleon Hill wrote, "Whatever the mind can conceive and believe, it can achieve." But here's the hidden layer. If the mind can also conceive fear and believe in failure, it can achieve that too. This is not about toxic positivity. It's not about pretending everything is perfect. It's about responsibility. Radical ownership of the thoughts you allow to live rent-free inside your mind. You have to start watching your inner world like a gatekeeper. Ask yourself daily, is this thought moving me toward wealth or away from it? Is this thought rooted in truth or in trauma? Is this thought building me or breaking me? Most people wait for money to fix their thoughts. But in the laws of the universe, it's always the opposite. It's the thought that calls the wealth. It's the inner alignment that summons the external blessing. So if you want to create lasting abundance, you don't start with action. You start with belief. You start with vision. You start with the deep cleansing of everything inside you that still thinks small. Because ultimately, the wealth you experience is just the echo of a belief you chose to repeat long enough to become reality. If wealth were simply about effort, then every exhausted soul would be a millionaire. But effort alone does not explain why one person multiplies and another stagnates. It doesn't explain why two people start with the same resources and only one thrives. Napoleon Hill devoted over 20 years of his life interviewing some of the wealthiest, most influential people on earth. And his conclusion wasn't about luck, intelligence, or even education. It was this: wealth is a consequence of a definite mental blueprint. one that is aligned with faith, clarity, and unwavering belief. In Think and Grow Rich, Hill spoke about definiteness of purpose, not just ambition, not vague hopes, but crystal clear inner direction. Most people don't lack ability, and they lack a mental compass. They wake up driven by circumstances instead of convictions. They want money, but they don't believe it's moral. They desire success, but they secretly fear attention. They pray for breakthrough, but speak daily words of defeat. The mind cannot manifest what the soul keeps contradicting. This is why Hill emphasized burning desire, not casual interest, not temporary motivation, a desire so white-hot, so all-consuming, that it begins to rewire the nervous system and override the doubt. Hill's blueprint began in the invisible, with thoughts turned to feelings, feelings turned to beliefs, beliefs turned to habits, and habits turned into destiny. And right at the center of this process is faith, not in religion, but in the divine intelligence that responds to clarity. He wrote, "Faith is the head chemist of the mind." In other words, when you combine belief with emotion, you change the chemical nature of your inner world. And once your inner world is changed, the outer world can no longer remain the same. This is not wishful thinking. This is a divine technology, a spiritual algorithm that obeys precision. What you consistently imagine, you begin to attract. What you deeply believe, you begin to build. And what you emotionally rehearse, you eventually experience. Now let's go deeper. Most people believe they need to earn abundance. They work harder. They hustle more. They sacrifice sleep and sanity. But Napoleon Hill revealed something radically different. Wealth responds not to work alone, but to vibrational alignment. This is why two people can do the same job, and only one attracts abundance. Hill taught that the subconscious mind is the gateway between thought and manifestation, and the subconscious is not influenced by logic. It is influenced by repetition and feeling. So every time you speak lack, believe in limitation, or rehearse old wounds, you are broadcasting a frequency that tells the universe, "This is what I deserve." But when your thoughts are saturated with faith, when your emotions are rehearsing success before it even arrives, when your words are in alignment with the outcome you claim to desire, you become a magnetic field for wealth. Here's where many fail. They pray for prosperity while feeling fear. They visualize success while carrying guilt. They say they trust God, but their nervous system is wired for self-doubt. You cannot deceive divine intelligence. It doesn't listen to what you say. It listens to what you feel. Hill knew this. That's why he wrote about the power of emotionalized autosuggestion, not just repeating affirmations but infusing them with conviction. Because conviction is what makes a thought alive. And only living thoughts can produce living results. This is why he warned against idle thinking. He said the mind is like fertile ground. It will grow weeds just as quickly as it grows roses. If you don't plant purpose, you'll default to pain. If you don't program abundance, your past will program scarcity. So what is your dominant emotional state today? Fear or faith? Doubt or certainty? Resentment or gratitude? You can't think wealth and feel unworthy. You can't imagine overflow and walk in shame. You must bring your emotions into agreement with your vision. Because the secret is this: the frequency you carry is louder than the words you speak, and the universe is always listening. Before new wealth can be built, old beliefs must be dismantled. This is the step that most skip, and it's the one that costs them the most. You see, every thought repeated in pain becomes a mental contract, a silent agreement that says, "I'll never have enough. People like me don't become wealthy. If I succeed, I'll lose love." Money changes people, and not for the better. These thoughts aren't just noise, they are architecture. They form the unseen structure of your choices, your boundaries, your self-worth. Napoleon Hill understood this well. He warned, "There are no limitations to the mind except those we acknowledge." That acknowledgement often happens without our awareness, through family scripts, through inherited trauma, through early experiences that wrote one message into the psyche: Playing small is safer than being powerful. And so, we build our lives to avoid risk instead of to attract reward. We ask for just enough instead of overflow. We celebrate survival instead of abundance. And we confuse humility with limitation. But here is the truth. Your soul did not come here to survive. It came here to create, to expand, to reflect the nature of divine abundance through the lens of your purpose. You must begin by identifying your inner contracts. Ask yourself, what were you taught about money that you've never questioned? What beliefs did your caretakers carry that you absorbed unconsciously? In what ways have you been loyal to your past at the expense of your future? Scarcity is not just a lack of money. It is a lack of permission. Permission to shine. Permission to want more. Permission to believe that wealth is not the enemy of spirit, but the extension of it. Until you break those inner contracts, you will sabotage every breakthrough. You'll build, and then self-destruct. You'll attract, and then repel. You'll rise, and then shrink back to comfort. Because the mind always returns to the level of belief it is most loyal to. And that belief will always dictate how much wealth your life can hold. Let's now move from dismantling scarcity to constructing abundance. Once the old mental contracts are exposed, the next step is not simply to think positive. It is to rewire the entire emotional memory system with a new frequency of permission and overflow. Napoleon Hill described this process using one of his most misunderstood principles, autosuggestion. To most, this sounds like affirmations, but for Hill, it was far more scientific. He believed autosuggestion was the process by which thoughts, deeply felt and repeatedly rehearsed, become commands for the subconscious. Not casual affirmations, but emotional blueprints. He taught that, if you want to change the financial outcome of your life, you must rehearse a version of yourself who already lives in that outcome. Not once, but until the mind surrenders to it as reality. Why does this work? Because the subconscious mind cannot tell the difference between a memory and a vividly imagined experience. It takes whatever you feel deeply and assumes it to be fact. So when you rehearse the emotions of abundance, gratitude, security, confidence, generosity, your subconscious starts building an identity to match. It doesn't start with doing more, it starts with being more aligned. From that place, action becomes magnetic. But here's the part few talk about. You cannot just affirm abundance. You must grieve the identity attached to lack. There is a strange comfort in being a victim. There is safety in blaming circumstances. There is familiarity in struggle. To become the person who attracts wealth, you must let go of the version of you that believed survival was noble and suffering was spiritual. This is deep work. It's not sexy. It's not quick. But it's sacred. Because it is the process of becoming undeniably available for the life you were designed to receive. You must speak to your subconscious like a child, repeat with love, feel with depth, and walk each day as if the answer is already here. You don't beg the universe, you align with it. You don't hustle for crumbs. You expand to carry the feast. And you don't just want wealth. You become the kind of person who can hold it, grow it, and multiply it for the glory of something greater than yourself. Wealth is not just about mindset. It is a divine pattern, a spiritual rhythm embedded into the fabric of the universe. Look at nature. A single seed becomes a forest. One drop becomes an ocean. The sun rises without hesitation. The stars shine without apology. There is no scarcity in the divine design. Only expansion. Only overflow. Only perfect timing. Napoleon Hill recognized this spiritual truth. Though he wrote in the language of success and achievement, his deeper message was this: you are not the source, but you are the channel. And when the channel is aligned with divine intelligence, provision becomes inevitable. Most people live as if they must chase after abundance, but the wise learn to position themselves to receive it. There's a sacred economy at work, one that honors faith, one that multiplies vision, one that waits for your inner world to become congruent with the outer reward you say you desire. Hill emphasized the necessity of definiteness of purpose, not just as a goal-setting tool, but as a spiritual key, a way to tell the universe, I am ready. I know what I want. I am aligned in thought, word, and emotion. Without clarity, there is confusion. And where there is confusion, energy scatters. When energy scatters, manifestation weakens. God does not reward confusion. God rewards clarity wrapped in obedience. This is why prosperity begins with identity, not activity. Before asking for more, ask, who am I becoming? What version of me would overflow attract? Is my posture aligned with the harvest I'm asking for? If you still carry the posture of lack, in your thoughts, your language, your self-concept, the divine pattern cannot flow through you. It will wait, because divine timing is not just chronological, it's energetic. It doesn't just happen when the clock strikes the right hour. It happens when you strike the right alignment. And that's when the doors swing open. Not because you forced them, but because you finally became the person they were always meant to open for. There is a truth that can feel hard to swallow, but it's the key to everything. God never withholds. He only aligns. If something hasn't arrived yet, it's not because God is punishing you. It's because you are still being prepared to hold it without collapsing under its weight. Napoleon Hill spoke repeatedly about the importance of faith backed by action. But he also warned, action without inner alignment leads to exhaustion, not results. Many people are working hard, praying hard, trying harder, but they are still operating from a frequency of fear. They say they trust, but deep inside, they are still negotiating with doubt. This is why spiritual alignment must become more than a concept. It must become a posture. The posture of someone who says, I don't just want the blessing, I am becoming the person who matches the blessing. I don't just chase success, I embody the principles that attract it. I don't just believe occasionally, I align continuously. This is obedience, not blind submission, but radical agreement with divine order. To obey is to surrender your timeline and trust the divine one. It is to build quietly even when no one claps. It is to persist with grace even when the harvest seems delayed. And it is in this process that the abundance you've asked for begins to form around you. Because the divine law is never absent, only exact. It doesn't respond to your panic, but to your pattern. And the pattern must be one of faith, clarity, gratitude, and alignment. Let's be clear. Wealth is not a reward for effort. It's a reflection of congruence. It shows up in your life when your thoughts, emotions, actions, and expectations are all telling the same story. That story must be, I am already chosen. I am already provided for. I am already the vessel for what's on its way. Once you stop striving and start aligning, you don't just receive wealth. You begin to magnetize it. It's no longer about chasing. It's about matching. The door to overflow is not locked. It's simply coded to a frequency, and that frequency is already within you, waiting to be activated by faith, obedience, and inner agreement. There is a common illusion we must now confront. Many people think wealth is something they acquire, a number in a bank account, a house on a hill, or a car in the driveway. But Napoleon Hill dismantled this illusion with a deeper truth. You never really get wealth. You become wealth. What does that mean? It means wealth isn't something outside of you that you chase down. It is a reflection, a mirror of your identity, your emotional home, and your inner architecture. This is why people who win the lottery often lose everything in a few years. The money changed, but their identity didn't. They still believed they weren't worthy. They still carried subconscious guilt about having more than others. They still identified with limitation, lack, or chaos. And so unconsciously, they found ways to return to the identity they knew, because safety is not found in success. It's found in familiarity. Hill taught that the real work of building wealth begins long before any financial result appears. It starts with the self-image, with how you see yourself when no one is watching, with how you talk to yourself when things go wrong, with what you believe you're allowed to receive. He called this the inner world of riches, a realm where confidence, faith, persistence, and imagination rule. a place where the soil of your future wealth is cultivated through unseen disciplines. Wealth, then, is not just a strategy. It is a state of being. And if your state is not stable, if it is dependent on outside validation, short-term wins, or constant achievement, then the wealth you build will be fragile. But when your state is grounded, in truth, in purpose, in inner security, then what you build becomes durable. Because it's no longer built on ego, it's built on identity. This is the shift. From doing to becoming, from chasing to embodying, from waiting to aligning. You do not need to prove your worth to earn wealth. You only need to become so aligned with it that its arrival becomes inevitable. Your reality always bends to the version of you that you've agreed to be. That's why wealth doesn't begin with a transaction. It begins with a decision, a deep, sacred decision about who you are and what you're no longer willing to tolerate. Most people live in silent agreements with mediocrity. They don't speak it aloud, but they reinforce it daily. I'm not the kind of person who becomes rich. People like me don't get lucky. It's too late for me. I don't have what it takes. And these hidden agreements form invisible ceilings that keep abundance out, that reject opportunity, that distort worthiness. Napoleon Hill's message was revolutionary not because he gave formulas, but because he gave permission. Permission to dream bigger, permission to think with power, permission to break the ancestral agreement with limitation. But permission is useless without agreement. The universe doesn't just respond to what you want. It responds to what you believe is already yours. This is where inner congruence becomes the most magnetic force of all. When you shift your self-talk from maybe to inevitably, when you begin to walk, speak, and think from the outcome rather than the obstacle, when your nervous system learns to feel safe in wealth rather than triggered by it, something changes, not just within you, but around you. People treat you differently. Opportunities seek you out. Resources begin to flow, not because the world changed, but because you did. This is why the wealthiest people in spirit are often wealthy in substance, not because they hustle more, but because they've made an unshakable agreement with truth. I am no longer available for scarcity. I am no longer loyal to smallness. I am no longer apologizing for abundance. This is not arrogance. This is alignment, and alignment is the new strategy. It transcends effort. It dismantles delay. It magnetizes the miraculous. Because once you become the version of you who receives, the receiving cannot be denied. Let this be the final revelation. You were never meant to chase wealth. You were meant to become the signal of it. Napoleon Hill never told people to worship money. He told them to embody principles that attract money naturally. Principles like definiteness of purpose, unshakable faith, persistence rooted in vision, not desperation. He knew something most people forget. Wealth doesn't come to the desperate. It comes to the aligned. And alignment is not performance. It's presence. It's the quiet knowing that your thoughts are shaping invisible forces. It's the silent confidence that your words carry the power of creation. It's the humility to know that what you seek is also seeking you, but it cannot recognize you if you keep disguising yourself in doubt. You are the signal. Your life is constantly transmitting a frequency through your beliefs, your tone, your expectations. If that signal is incoherent, chaotic, fearful, or small, the universe can only respond in kind. It mirrors back your inner state. But when the signal becomes clean, when your frequency is clear, committed, and convicted, when your internal yes is louder than external noise, that's when things begin to align without force. That's when doors open that logic can't explain. That's when divine timing and mental clarity merge into inevitable expansion. This is the final elevation. To stop begging for miracles and start broadcasting as one. To become so deeply rooted in inner truth that even in the midst of delay or rejection, you hold the posture of the blessed. Not because you're trying to convince the world, but because your soul already knows. It is done. It is written. It is yours. If you've reached this point, it means something ancient in your soul has remembered. You were never here to live a small life. You were never meant to dim your thoughts, to shrink your dreams, or to apologize for wanting more. Your thoughts are sacred tools, not just echoes of the past, but instruments of creation. Each one is a seed. Each one is a prayer. Each one holds within it the power to either replicate your wounds or rewrite your world. So the question that remains is not, will you succeed? The question is, will you finally become the person who receives? Will you stop aligning with your old identity, the one built on lack, on fear, on ancestral guilt, and step into the version of you who sees wealth as a divine inheritance, not a reward you must bleed for? This is not about pretending. This is about remembering. Remembering that there is a blueprint inside you, a vision, a contract, a destiny. And every time you align your thoughts with that destiny, every time you protect your inner world from the poison of doubt, every time you speak as if it's already unfolding, you are walking the path that Napoleon Hill laid out for you, a path of purpose, a path of prosperity, a path of unshakable faith. You were never meant to just survive this life. You were meant to transform it, with your mind, with your faith, with your voice. So if this message spoke to you, if something in your spirit whispered yes as you listened, then claim it now. In the comments, write, "I am the signal. Wealth flows through me." Let the world see the moment you stopped waiting and started transmitting. Your thoughts are no longer just thoughts. They are your legacy.